Well, welcome to my series, Unveiling the Secrets of Executive Presence. As a certified image professional and in my business, which is Style for Life, I have the good fortune to work with some of Australia's most influential women who are committed to making a difference in the world and are not afraid to showcase their strength and courage with a powerful visual brand. These women appreciate that an authentic image makes them even more credible, confident, and impressive than they appear on paper. But as an ambitious woman, the journey to the C-suite can be filled with insecurity, fear, judgment, and second guessing all around whether your executive presence and gravitas is going to be enough. Executive presence is one of the most important skills in successful business, but it's also amongst the least understood, which is why I started this series. So Unveiling the Secrets of Executive Presence provides insights into how to develop and use executive presence as a powerful tool for career advancement through interviews with the most accomplished senior executive women in Australia. These women are highly respected leaders in their fields who concur that executive presence is a skill that should be learned and mastered to make a very real difference. And they share how they use it to achieve success both personally and professionally and what executive presence has meant for them. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Danette Fenton-Menzies, who I've worked with before. Now, Danette is the Director of Learning for Magical Learning and author of The Adaptable Leader, which is due out early November 2023. She is a chartered accountant, CPA, and executive coach with over 30 years' experience in both the public and private sectors. For the past 25 years, Danette has run training and consulting companies with her husband, focusing on leadership and finance. Her work includes facilitating and coaching across the globe. Danette lives on her farm near Gundagai, New South Wales, and loves to learn and travel. Such a pleasure to have you on the program, Danette.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. Pleasure to be here.
I'm curious to learn more about your book, which maybe we can discuss later. But, firstly, can you tell us a time about when you first realised the importance of executive presence in your career?
Yes. So I started many years ago in my career. I always say that. And I started when there were the big 8 accounting firms. And I noticed that there were a number of people who weren't the smartest people. However, they developed their executive presence by surrounding themselves with really smart people. And by doing that, were able to move up the ladder in the organizations pretty quickly and have a good impact. Not because it was just about them, it was also about who they surrounded themselves with. And so that to me was like, okay, so part of success isn't just what you know, it's also how you present yourself, and who you surround yourself with. So that for me piqued a curiosity, because I'm always interested in what helps people to become successful. And not just from a monetary perspective, but for me, success is also about the impact that we can have. And so obviously in organizations, the higher you are, the more impact you can have. So a key element is the executive presence, and therefore developing it stops you hitting a roadblock along the way.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? And, a lot of people really struggle with the whole term executive presence and what does it mean, but there's various different components of it. And I know a lot of senior executive women are sort of working around this whole concept of gravitas, getting more gravitas, and it's all about communication. But communication is actually not just verbal, it can be visual as well, which I know we've had many discussions about. So can you describe what strategies you might have used to actually amplify your own executive presence?
Great question, Julie. For me, because I do a lot of training and that, working on my communication skills, particularly since COVID, working way more on the video ones. For example, even just a simple thing like not looking at the person on screen or the people on screen, but looking at the camera so that you're talking to the people directly. Learning also to slow down. So I noticed that if I'm not so confident, I'll tend to speed up, which tends to raise the pitch of my voice. And what we know about leaders is the lower the pitch, the more people will pay attention. So deliberately slowing down, pausing, which is really important for impact, and then taking the time to, just go through it. Obviously, undulate your voice and things like that. I think also being really authentic. So I am naturally a very optimistic, friendly person. So that, I don't try and hide that in what I do. And I'm also reminded that it's not about me. So if I want to be a really good executive and have impact, it's thinking about how do I take others on that journey? How do I communicate better with them? And how do I remain calm to work with their brain and also my brain in order to be able to move forward in a really positive manner?
There's a lot in that.
There is.
There's a lot
I
in what
spent
you
years on
just
this.
said. There is so much in what you've just said. You're talking a lot about voice control, pitch, pace. Where does someone learn all of that? I mean, you're in the learning space.
Yes.
So, how does someone who is perhaps thinking about, well, what can I do in terms of how I communicate with others to moderate my voice and get it to the tone which other people are going to hear? Because I understand that there are certain levels of voice pitch where people don't hear it for whatever reason. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
I always think about the different ways people learn. Some of the listeners will gravitate to particular podcasts. And I just get curious about, okay, what am I enjoying in terms of the voice? What do they do? The really successful ones, what do you notice that they do different to perhaps people who are starting out? If you're more visual, using things like videos to have a look at, who do you admire? What do they do, again, compared to someone starting out? Because we all have to start out, and don't try and do everything at once. Pick one thing. So it might be, how do I lower my voice? And think about, okay, there's a great exercise. There's a book called Raise Your Voice. The gentleman's name, I think, is Richard Lawton. He's an Australian. And he has some lovely exercises in his book about lowering your voice. So even humming Happy Birthday, a couple of bars of that can lower your voice. Wow. And just getting, I know, it's really, really interesting. Another thing is, if you want to boost sort of the power of your voice, is to stand up versus sitting down. So I have an electric treadmill desk, and obviously when I'm doing podcasts, I'm not moving. However, I am standing up because that allows you to access more of your diaphragm than if you're sitting down and you're a little bit squashed. And it's also recording yourself. We all have filler words. The filler words are, things like so, are, like, etc. And they interrupt us. The idea with the filler words is our body is wanting us to pause. So if we were reading a sentence, it might be a comma where we pause or a full stop. And when we're not confident, we tend to want to rush through. And then something like a so is your body going slow down, or an
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really, I do a lot around communication, and I still have filler words from time to time because I start to speed up. So it's that reminder, slow down. Space is beautiful. So one of the things I notice with people with that gravitas is that they will ask a question. So they're very curious, and they ask the question and they leave space for the other person, because that works for the other person's brain to come up with a good answer. They don't want to show how smart they are. They actually bring the smart out of other people. Again, that's great for collaboration as well.
It is, and it shows that that person has, is intelligent and they're respectful of the other person, and they've obviously worked on themselves a lot. So yeah, really, really good ideas there and really good tips. So in terms, what was it you were just saying before? I thought of something as you were talking then, and it was about learning and watching other people and how they speak, how they communicate, how they conduct themselves, so their body language. I also advocate that women watch other people in terms of how they present themselves visually.
Yes.
Because this is one thing that I feel women let themselves down in that department, that they think it's enough to have fabulous credentials and, you know, they've worked on their communication skills, their verbal communication skills, but they haven't worked on the appearance side, which is one of the actual critical factors of executive presence.
Yes.
So in your experience in being a CPA and in your learning capacity and facilitating, and I know you work with some pretty significant companies, what's your observations in that particular space?
It's totally true what you're saying, Julie. We naturally, whether we like it or not, we tend to judge people. And if you're looking around a room, you're looking at, okay, who's dressed beautifully, who sort of is standing out. And we naturally start to think of them, particularly if they're calm, as the leader, even if they're not. And if I'm trying to convince someone and they're a senior person and I turn up and I'm not polished, that has an impact on how they perceive me, particularly first up. And what we want when we first meet someone is to create that connection. So rather than our brain sees strangers as foes, we want to create something where people go, oh, they're a bit like me. So therefore we create that connection and trust. And one of the ways you absolutely can do that is making sure that how you present yourself, what you're wearing, etc., matches the environment you're in. So obviously, if you're working with workers and you go in fully dressed up, they may not be as convinced about you versus if you go fully dressed, suit, etc., with a C-suite team. So it also is picking your audience to think about what is going to create that connection as well. And obviously, most of my audience are C-suite, which means I'm usually dressed up pretty fancy.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and that's how I work with my clients too. It's all about, you know, who are you meeting? You know, what's the occasion? What's the outcome you want? And if you can address all of those factors, and then you're dressing to really suit yourself in terms of, you know, your physical presence, and you know, then that does go a long way to people instantly feeling at ease and comfortable with you and ready to listen to what you have to say, which is where the communication skills come in.
Yeah. And it was one of the things, Julie, when you and I worked together, particularly when COVID was starting, that helped me realise what worked, particularly on a video where you don't have that face-to-face connection versus what doesn't work. And I love the fact that it's dependent on your personal style. Versus we all have to look the same. So that I also found really, really helpful and have continued to use that ever since we worked together.
No, that's good. No, I don't advocate that women all look the same. That doesn't allow you to be your authentic self and create that personal brand that you really need to have. So just moving on, in your opinion, what are some of the common misconceptions about executive presence that you've perhaps observed, and how can other women or individuals work to overcome those?
I see people, particularly when they're starting off and maybe they haven't got a mentor or a coach to sort of give them feedback, they often think it's the person who speaks the most, who is the loudest in the room. And yet when you observe the really great people, they're often the quietest, they're humble, they're very curious, because they already know what they know. What they want to learn is, what does everyone else in the room know? Therefore, asking beautiful questions, listening to understand where the other person's coming from, because we all have different perspectives. And just taking the time to not just showcase what they know, but showcase what others know. because they know that that's where the great answers come from. So I think when we make it about ourselves, that's often we're fearful, and you know, we all are fearful as we start out. It's recognizing, actually, if we want to have that great executive presence, we're already confident in what we know. What we're curious about is what we don't know, what others in the room know, and therefore taking the time to ask those questions, listen to the replies, to broaden our understanding and also bring others in on the conversation.
Allow people to come to you.
Yes.
But I guess that also goes back to, you know, when you're going into that scenario where you need to be able to be a great leader, it's having the presence, so having the visual presence that they feel immediately really comfortable with you, that they can trust you and that they're going to be open to, you know, having conversations with you. And then, yes, just being that observer first and just sort of hearing what's going on and inviting people to actually speak and
Yes.
then acquiring that knowledge. Yeah. I know, I think we've probably both seen examples of people wanting to make it all about them and talking all about them and what they do and how wonderful they are, which sometimes can be a turn off.
Yes, correct. Yep. There's a lovely thing I learned when I was doing my coaching qualifications. If you think that's you, there's this acronym WAIT, and WAIT stands for Why Am I Talking? And so it's a really good, I know, I love it, because if you're more extroverted, you often process through talking. And when you're nervous, you will become less aware of how long you are talking. So I really like that as just a gentle reminder. Yeah, why am I talking? What's my intention? And I think when I see people with great presence, they're very intentional when they speak, versus when we're learning, until we realize it's not about me, it's about understanding the room, we take too much time talking if we're a little bit more extroverted.
Okay, so it's also about becoming aware of your personality style as well.
Correct. Yes.
And how to manage that personality style to assimilate with other people, because everyone's different.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. And look, that's interesting because, you know, when we do bring in a little bit of my work here, but when we bring in color analysis and we talk about the personality, how the personalities align with different color directions, then, you know, the whole science and the psychology comes into that in terms of, okay, well, if you're very much an extroverted person, you are able to wear much brighter colors and higher contrast of colors together and patterns. But is that applicable to certain scenarios whereby you have to tone it down and provide that sort of space for people to feel like you're not a threat and you can actually come in and have meaningful conversations?
I really like that because, again, it's thinking before you go into the room. How do I, you know, because your clothes in that instance will show that you are more extroverted, etc. What we want to do is then go, okay, but I can also listen.
Yes.
And learn. So I love that. Yeah.
Really interesting. So a couple of years ago, we had this extraordinary situation with the pandemic, and it did have a profound impact on women in the workplace. So what's the biggest shift that you've experienced in how women present themselves now versus pre-COVID? Have you seen a shift?
I've seen a shift, and with that shift, some people have done it really well and others, and I'd love to share this in this conversation, there's some work to do. There's a reason I wear a headset, and I do have a microphone for podcasts as well, but today I just thought I'll just use this because it helps capture the voice. So when we're talking, say, on video, which still a lot of organizations are doing, if we can't see the person well, it lowers trust, particularly if we don't know them. If we can't hear them well, so if it's Julie, it disconnects. So being mindful that letting people see you, if you can't be face to face, the next best communication is video, because we can pick up each other's micro expressions. So taking the time to make sure that you are dressed nicely, you don't turn up in your pajamas if you're talking to your group, etc., because it might be comfortable. However, the message, as you said, is not necessarily presenting you in your best light. Taking the time to make sure that people can see you through having lighting behind your computer. So my computer faces out with a window behind it. I also have lighting to make sure that people can see my face. Again, wearing the headset so people can hear me. Thinking about even just your background. So one of the things, Julie, throughout COVID, I loved about you is your beautiful background. And again, if there's lots of clutter behind you, it's like, okay, what else is cluttered? Thinking about what is that background, or if you don't have a great background, say it correctly, then using either blur it out or perhaps having a virtual background can be really, really helpful. Again, you could use it to promote your brand in some instances.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I do find the virtual backgrounds a little distracting at times, though, because if you move slightly away from the camera, it all goes terribly wrong.
Yes.
Simplicity, is best.
Yes.
At the
Yes.
end of the day, keep things simple. But
yes.
Obviously, if you are promoting a brand or you're communicating a brand presence, then having something in the background that aligns with that,
Yes.
that makes people think, oh, okay, yes, look, I have lovely flowers and I have a little colour swatch there and I have things that indicate that I am who I am, and I'm not a fake.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really important.
Yes. Yes. And mine's global. So my daughter did this wall behind me for that very reason, because we deal with a lot of global clients. And so that was part of my background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So how has the concept of executive presence evolved over your career for you? And it sort of goes back to the first question when you were talking about your observations about, certain people that may not have stood out visually, but they just had that knack of surrounding themselves with the right people so that they could climb the ladder. Yeah.
How it's grown for me is learning that I already know what I know. My role is really to learn what the room knows. Therefore, the less I speak, the more I actually have a really good impact, because if I can hear those divergent perspectives, I can help create something that is way more inclusive and collaborative, which in today's world, we really want that. And whether you're doing it face-to-face or video, it's being the person in the room who's the calmest. So we know that the calmest person when there's chaos is the person we're going to look to as the leader that has that executive presence. Making sure that you turn up, whether it is on video or in person, in a way that represents you as your brand, and always continuing to grow and learn. So great questions are a fabulous way of doing that. Every time you ask a great question, your brain opens up and learns new things. And in the world we live in today, being able to do that and then share that with others so that you don't just grow yourself, that you grow others. Because I see, at my stage in life, I'm all about growing more leaders. And I want to be of service. And the best way to do that is for me to keep learning and growing and knowing that I don't know everything and never can. However, I can bring better outcomes when I bring others' ideas into the conversation.
Wow, that's fabulous. And you're right, though, because I still learn from my clients too, because my clients are, fabulous women in incredible positions, some of them. And I just used a filler word. I just realised.
I do it all the time, Julie. We're not perfect, are we?
And again, I said it again. But they're incredible women, and I feel extremely humbled to be able to work with them. But I am working in a space that they're not, they don't have the time to be able to do the work that I do for them. and I know they appreciate it enormously. But I love being able to be with them, to dress them, to advise them, to introduce new things to them. And when we're having conversations, I learn so much from my clients as well, because they are in different industries, come from different backgrounds. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love it.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now, Danette?
I love that question, Julie. So for me, I never want to retire. What I will do is change how I work. So I will do more time traveling and working while I'm traveling, and also taking time off to continue to grow myself. I know I've just written my first book. I know that I have a number of books in me. That's going to be part of what I'm doing. And also taking the time to mentor those that are coming up, so the younger generations, to help them navigate a world that is really uncertain, and there's lots of disruption. And I think 25 years in business with my husband Graham has taught me to navigate disruption in a way that works with my brain and works with other people's brains. And I love sharing that to empower people to show up as the best version of themselves during disruption, during this uncertainty. So I never want to retire, but I do want to change how I work.
Talk to me about that.
So just less days, I think, doing the training. So I see my ideal as probably 3 days a week training, and the rest of the time learning and growing. And my ideal time off is about 3 months a year. And that would be interspersed throughout the year, because I know that when I take breaks, that's when my biggest ahas come. I watch a lot of leaders be really busy and they get staler and staler. What I've learned is actually the best work comes when I take time off to allow my brain to do the heavy lifting, and then come back and go, oh, guess what I just learned? And share that and help others grow and learn to live a life that works for them, not a life of overload.
Sounds like you're describing work-life balance really well, which is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yes.
Finding that balance.
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly about, giving yourself time to rest, physically, mentally, because then the ideas do flow. I always used to love getting down to the coast, because I think it was the oxygen in the air or something about the whole environment that just allowed the ideas to flow. And I always took notepads, because just come up with a fabulous idea, and before you knew it, you had it all mapped out on a big piece of paper. That's how I work anyway.
Same.
And I've just got to get rid of that word. But it was fabulous. A great way for me to actually recuperate and regenerate. And I do that now. I do that by playing sport.
Nice.
Try and take time off wherever I can to get out there and exercise and be out in the fresh air, to hear the birds, to, even potentially see the snakes. But it's
Totally here.
Really good. It's really good, and I highly recommend that. And to take little breaks every now and then. And so that actually leads into my next question, which I think you've answered already, which is, what are you doing to ensure it's an area of strength for you and those you are mentoring? Because the ones you are mentoring are the ones who are relying on you to be able to guide them in the right way and give them the correct advice. So if you're feeling tired or stressed or getting stale, overwhelmed, bored, whatever it might be, then how can you mentor others? How can you be that role model that they want to, they can follow in and do all of the wonderful things to get them to where they want to be?
Yeah, totally agree. One tool I found really helpful, and this was introduced by Robin Sharma for me, is the stop doing list. As we rise up, We need to stop doing certain things that are no longer, in our wheelhouse. So we're good at them, but they don't necessarily deliver the value that we need at that next level. So while I'm both chartered and CPA in my business, I do zero accounting. And I do that very deliberately because it's not where I value add. I value add in 4 areas. So meeting with my clients, learning and growing to deliver new science around what we're doing, growing my team, and delivering. So I spend about 95% of my time in those 4 areas. Therefore, the stuff that I could do that I'm good at, but it doesn't value add, goes to other team members or we outsource it. And I think we tend to want to do everything, and it's good to learn to do it, and then you need to learn to let go. And so I love that idea of stop doing to create the space and be really intentional about your breaks, because your breaks are actually where your brain does the heavy lifting. Same with sleep. When people say to me, I thrive on 5 hours, I'm like, that's not good for you long term. What we need to do is get regular breaks, regular good sleep, because they're foundational to great brain work. And what we need in the chaos of the world we're in at the moment is to be nice and calm. It's very difficult to do if you're running on no air at all, basically. So I love your ideas about, going down the coast, writing things out and stuff like that, because that's where you tap into that, great potential in your brain.
You mentioned so many important things, Danette, there. I love that concept of stop doing. It's very hard for busy women who perhaps are running their own business, who are sole person dependent, who do still have to do everything, and I'm guilty of that. I do have some help, but certainly I could do with more. And it's a trap I think a lot of people fall into when they are running their own business. They know they need to be dealing at that higher level to deal with all of those really important things that are working on the business, that they get caught up in the working in the business. And it's a push-pull type situation, isn't it, for a lot of those?
It is. Yeah. And so, sometimes it's thinking a little bit outside the box. So, can you work with someone where maybe you do some things for them with your skills, and then you sort of trade a little bit to be able to support each other? There's a great book called Why 10X is Better Than 2X. Highly recommend that book, because again, it talks about the great businesses at scale. It's about who you've got in the business and the skills they bring. Therefore, being more intentional about what are the gaps I have. And I charge, obviously, when I'm presenting, I charge. So I know the value of 1 hour of my time presenting versus some of the jobs that I could do, that I could pay someone many, many times or many, many hours for 1 hour of me presenting. I think what we need to learn is the value of what we deliver, and then think about, okay, what are the lower value things, or the things that I'm just really, they drain my energy, because that actually impacts when you show up in front of your clients. So if we can get rid of some of those, and the lovely thing about things like AI and that is there are some tools there that can actually help us get better at some of the things that maybe we're like, oh, I'm not necessarily loving that particular thing. And your greatness comes when you work on those areas that you discount, that you're really good at. And other people are like, you're amazing at that, Julie. I don't know how you do it. And you're like, oh, no, I can do that. That's so easy. Everyone can do that. That's actually where your gifts are. And so I often say to people, pay attention to where you're getting those compliments and you discount. That's where you should be investing more time, because that's going to create a great business where you've got the energy, but you've also got the impact.
And that's what executive presence is all about.
Totally.
This has been an amazing conversation, Danette. Thank you so much for all your insights. When can people get a copy of your book, and where will it be on sale?
It's a great question. So I have my own website. So not only do I have magicallearning.com, but I have danettefm.com, because my last name's too busy. So And the book will be available from my website. It will also be available both as an ebook and also a paperback book, and you can get them through danettefm.com.
Well, I hope you tell me when it's finally released, because I'll be really interested to get
It'll be early November.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Anyone who's listened to this conversation would be really intrigued, because you've given them so many pearls of wisdom and insights into communication, into being a great leader, into showing up the way you need to get other people's respect and trust. It's been just a fabulous conversation.
Really enjoyed connecting again too, Julie. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thanks, Danette.
Thank you.